I kind of can associate with Zacchaeus because growing up, I was always a late bloomer. For most of my time in school, I was the shortest boy in the class and shorter than a lot of the girls, too. And it wasn't until really my junior year that I started really getting some height. But in the midst of that, I also, was not the great athlete that I am today. And so when we would have these pickup games of whatever, or in gym class, when they have these two different captains that have to pick the teams, I was almost always last when I was picked. You know how that makes you feel? Kind of rotten. And so I can see Zacchaeus, being as short as he is, how that must have affected him growing up. And maybe being picked on. And how did that then affect his mentality in terms of how he dealt with people? With all that, we know that he became a tax collector and a chief tax collector. And it says he was a rich one, which meant he extorted a lot of people. Why? Well, being a tax collector in the ancient Roman world was not like being in the IRS today. As much as people may not like the IRS, the tax collectors of that time certainly would have been a different category altogether. First of all, because the Romans were the hated people who had come in and invaded this land, their land of Israel. And so anyone that was in collusion with them was certainly on the outs. And then secondly, the way it worked was the Romans would have said, you have to pay us this much for this area, and you have to figure out the taxes. Well, the way that usually worked is, let's say you have 1,000 people in your area, and you have to pay the Roman government $10,000. Well, easy math. You get $10 from each family, right? Well, usually it would be more like 100 or 200 from each family, extorting them and then living off of what excess there was. And it says he was a rich man. He must have been doing this for a long time and taking far more than was his due. Needless to say, Zacchaeus was not really well liked. And I wonder if he decided to go into the profession of being a tax collector because of the wounds he experienced growing up. Because we know that hurt people hurt people. So in his wounds, he wanted to wound others. But then he hears about Jesus. And Jesus comes to his town. Now Luke says that Jesus came to Jericho and intended to pass through the town. And so he's passing through, and Zacchaeus can't see because, well, he's a little bit short and he can't see over the crowd. So he gets this idea. He runs ahead and climbs a tree. Now, could you imagine? That's like seeing a banker all in a suit and tie going and climbing a tree. That's kind of awkward. And yet he was so driven to see Jesus. This is what he did. And as Jesus comes by, he stops. He looks up and he calls Zacchaeus by name. Zacchaeus, come down quickly, for today I must stay at your house. And Luke says that Zacchaeus came down quickly. I wonder if maybe it was because he was so shocked, he let go of the branch and he fell down. Who knows? In any case, it has struck his heart. Here was this man, picked last, on the edge of society, hated by his own people because, in essence, he is a traitor. And with that, Jesus not only knows his name, but he chooses him. He chooses him to stay at his house. And not only that, God changes his plan for love of this man. He intended to pass through the town. Instead, he stayed the night. Because of Zacchaeus. Because of Zacchaeus. This is God speaking to us today. I have called you by name, he says, and you are mine. He chooses you. He chooses me. First. We're not the last one there on the dock and saying, oh, well, I suppose we have to pick you. No, God chooses you first. It says, I want you on my team. And he is willing to change his plans for you, for me. That is how precious we are. Do we know how loved we are? How we are chosen by God, how he calls us by name. If we really allowed that truth to settle deep within our souls, what would that do to us? How would that change us? You see, Jesus went to go see Zacchaeus because he knew the wounds that were in Zacchaeus' past, in his life, in his heart. And he wanted to heal them and say, see, you are mine, you are chosen, you're not rejected, you are loved. And he knows our wounds. He knows how we have been hurt. He knows how we have been wounded by the rejection and abandonment of others. And Jesus says, I myself choose you, and I want to heal your wounds. I want to stay in your house, in your life, in your heart. The question is, will we allow him to come to our house, to our hearts? Will we allow him in? When Zacchaeus said yes, it wasn't like Jesus was standing over him and saying, and Zacchaeus, what about all the people you've extorted? No, from the depths of his heart, he realized what he had done, and he knew he had to change. And in joy, he said, behold, half of my possessions, Lord, I shall give to the poor, and if I have extorted anyone of anything, I shall repay it 4 times over. Which the law at that time only said you had to repay it twice over. He went beyond because he was so stirred by the love of God. What will the love of God do for us? How will it stir us to transformation? A lot of times we think we have to do better on our own, and then we can come to Jesus. Rather, Jesus says, I want to come to you now in your brokenness, in your weakness, in your frailty. I want to come to you where you are and show you how you are loved. And it is from the fire of that love that our lives are changed.